Mr. President, thank you for your patience and thank you for your time today. The world is watching with great anticipation as President Trump addresses the United Nations. Will you be watching or attending?
I personally will not be attending. However, probably I will listen to it through television.
What do you expect President Trump to say about Iran, about the nuclear agreement?
What is important is that the issue of the JCPOA is as an agreement that after years of hard work, and the hard work of 7 countries nonetheless, and the support of tens of countries, including the European Union, this agreement was obtained. This agreement can be beneficial for everyone, for all sides, and alleviate preoccupations and concerns, and pave the way and create the conditions for all countries and all nations to benefit from commercial and economic, scientific, as well as cultural relationships between countries. Therefore, the JCPOA is an agreement to everyone's benefit, and Iran is a nation in the region of the Middle East that is destabilized. It is a factor for stability. So any words against this reality cannot be helpful for the region or for international relations. I do hope that all of those whom speak from the podium of the United Nations would be mindful of speaking in a way, in a fashion that would benefit nations and the entire world.
What do you expect President Trump to say about Iran, about the nuclear agreement?
What is important is that the issue of the JCPOA is as an agreement that after years of hard work, and the hard work of 7 countries nonetheless, and the support of tens of countries, including the European Union, this agreement was obtained. This agreement can be beneficial for everyone, for all sides, and alleviate preoccupations and concerns, and pave the way and create the conditions for all countries and all nations to benefit from commercial and economic, scientific, as well as cultural relationships between countries. Therefore, the JCPOA is an agreement to everyone's benefit, and Iran is a nation in the region of the Middle East that is destabilized. It is a factor for stability. So any words against this reality cannot be helpful for the region or for international relations. I do hope that all of those whom speak from the podium of the United Nations would be mindful of speaking in a way, in a fashion that would benefit nations and the entire world.
You made headlines yesterday by saying the United States will pay a high price if it withdraws from the nuclear agreement. Some might hear a threat in those words. Do you care to clarify what you mean by a high price?
In a multilateral agreement which has received the support of the United Nations Security Council, and the core of it is a non-proliferation matter, the exiting of the United States from such an agreement would carry a high cost, meaning that subsequent to such a probable action by the United States of America, no one will trust America again. And there is no higher price to be paid than this, because after such a possible scenario, which country would be willing to sit across the table from the United States of America and talk about international issues? Because the JCPOA was obtained after over 2 years of negotiations and dialogues that included sessions over every single word contained in that agreement. Every word was analyzed many times by countries involved before its ratification. So if the United States were to not adhere to the commitments and trample upon this agreement, this will mean that it will carry with it the lack of subsequent trust from countries towards the United States, because the greatest capital that any country has is trust and credibility.
Trust and credibility, but do you also think that there's an economic price that the United States would pay by withdrawing from this treaty?
Well, economically, right now the conditions do exist for United States enterprises, American enterprises, and companies and entities. The conditions are very favorable. We see today that many companies from Europe, including France, Belgium, Italy, have come to Iran and are active and are undertaking joint ventures and investments with Iranian entities in the field of petroleum, petrochemicals, gas, water resources, infrastructure, rail transportation, air transportation, and other fields. The Americans can indeed use such an atmosphere to their benefit as well. Now there are important contracts between different airlines in Iran and Boeing, and many of these dialogues and negotiations are almost on the last steps, in the last phases. So purchases by various Iranian airlines from Boeing would benefit the United States of America. Constructive relationships would benefit both nations and the world at large. So above and beyond trust and credibility, better relationships in the region and across the world, more stability in the region, commercial and economic relationships, scientific and cultural relationships between the people, warm relationships, tourism. Why would it be that the United States, the people of the United States, couldn't come to see the historic and the depth of culture that Iran and Persians have to offer? Why is it that Iranians couldn't come to the United States and meet Americans and see what America is about? And I do think that preventing nations and people from getting to know one another, from exchanging information and ideas and science and knowledge and economic activities, it is a loss for the Americans. Those whom in America are called officials and are called decision makers in the government and in the administration, at the very least, they should be focused on the benefit of their own people. So here we say this: will exiting the JCPOA benefit the United States of America, the nation, the people of America? It will certainly not. The existence of the JCPOA, what benefit does it carry? It paves the way and readies the continuation for cultural exchanges, for more exchanges. So the fundamental question is the relationship the way it was being carried forward the last 40 years, has that benefited both nations and both countries or no? We do think that there are better pathways ahead that would benefit both countries and the world at large.
If the U.S. withdraws from the JCPOA, that'll leave 6 other countries still in the deal. Would anything change from Iran's perspective? Would Iran continue to abide by the terms of the deal?
What other countries in the last few months have announced quite clearly, whether the Russians, the Chinese, or the European Union, all of it consisted of that they will remain committed to the JCPOA, and they have also suggested strongly to the United States of America to remain committed to the JCPOA. So were the United States to exit the JCPOA, it will create, of course, new conditions and framework. And under those new conditions, Iran has the right to make her own choice. because the commitments of Iran under those previous conditions would no longer exist, because they were based on the participation of 7 countries, and the UN Security Council approved it. If one country, one party to this agreement were to exit, then various options would be at the disposal of Iran, and according to her own best interest, Iran would be free to make a choice of one of the many available options.
So Iran would be able to make choices if the U.S. withdrew. Would that include resuming some of the nuclear activities that are currently prohibited?
Always one of the options and choices where one of our counterparts not to remain in the current framework would be to go back to previous activities. This is one option, and that's not difficult. We can easily go back to previous conditions if counterparts were to not live up to their commitments. But you do know fairly well that Iran will not be the initiator of this return to that path. And the institution that must pass judgment based on facts whether Iran has remained faithful and committed to her part of the bargain has done so over and over again. The IAEA has done so many times that Iran has lived up to her commitments. From a viewpoint of credibility, of character, it is very important for us, because many of the accusations, of the unjust accusations that were being levied against Iran for a long time have now been alleviated due to this reporting.
To be clear, when you say resume activities, you're speaking about peaceful activities. You're not talking about a weapons program.
Certainly, what I mean is return to peaceful activities only. Clearly, unequivocally, we were members of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, signatories to it. We did not and do not intend to leave it, and we were members of the safeguards, and even under the current conditions that were implementing the JCPOA framework, we are also adhering to additional protocols. So we will never go towards production of nuclear weapons. Just as in the past, we never intended to go towards that path, nor did we ever. It has always been peaceful.
You mentioned that American trust is on the line here, depending on what the United States does. But the U.S. obviously has trust issues with Iran. They single out the ballistic missile launches as working against the spirit of the agreement. How far does Iran have to go? How does it prove that it's trustworthy in this deal?
This expression by the Americans is not correct, because if you do look at and return to what our dialogue with the Americans consisted of during the months leading up to the JCPOA, we said again and again that we will never open the topic to discussion of our defensive missile capabilities. So the spirit and the letter of the JCPOA consists of that it will not and it does not pertain to the defensive capabilities and the legitimate defensive needs of a country. We live in a very sensitive region. Iran has lived through 8 years of an unjust imposed war initiated by Saddam Hussein. Iran has been the victim of terrorism through many years for a long period of time. So, in order to safeguard our nation and our people, we do need defensive capabilities. Those missile capabilities constitute a part of our defensive capacity. During 8 years of an imposed war, our people lived under the constant threat of Saddam Hussein's missiles. And during that time, we could not respond in kind to those missiles. And through the production of our own missiles, finally, we were able to respond in kind to Saddam's aggression. And it was at that time that Saddam Hussein ceased firing missiles upon our cities. So missiles have been carved into the collective national memory of our people who were the victims of this aggression, and they're quite sensitive to it. And during the negotiations with the aim of reaching the JCPOA, we said it again and again to our counterparts, in particular to the United States of America as well, that the defensive capabilities will never be a topic of negotiation.
The Trump administration representatives, the president in New York, and they are putting Iran essentially in the same basket as North Korea, portraying both countries as a threat to stability and peace and calling on the world to act. How do you feel when you hear Iran and North Korea spoken about in the same breath?
Well, it is very incorrect to say such a thing, because North Korea today is not a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. North Korea has not allowed the inspectors of the IAEA to enter its territory. North Korea has said in a very straightforward manner that I seek nuclear weapons. It tests nuclear weapons. There is nothing hidden in North Korea. North Korea is a country whom today is in the nuclear club, and it does have nuclear weapons. Iran is completely the opposite point. From the very beginning, from the inception, it was a signatory and a member to the NPT, a member to the safeguards. And today, it welcomes on a continuous, ongoing basis the presence of the inspectors of the IAEA. And it collaborates with them. Iran is a country whose supreme leadership has said that the pursuit, the development, or the use of any type of weapons of mass destruction is considered to be unholy and unequivocally forbidden. Therefore, we do not seek such capacities. We never have. We wish to have nuclear energy for peaceful uses, just as today in Iraq, there is collaboration between America, China, and Iran for the completion of the power plant in Iraq. And just as today it is being talked about, the IAEA is giving reports on a continuous basis about Iran. So putting Iran and North Korea in the same sentence, in the same breath, it is only intended to deviate the thought of people from the path of that which is true. It is against good character, it is absolutely incorrect, and it shows, it further underlines the fact that we must be responsible to bring the truth to the people.
I am curious about your thoughts on North Korea. Iran has diplomatic relations with North Korea. Iran also has significant investment in Asia and certainly a stake in the stability and safety of that region. How do you see the tensions right now between North Korea and the United States, and what are you learning from it?
We have announced this openly and clearly and said that we are against the production of nuclear weapons in any country, wherever it may be. Nuclear weapons will never benefit international security. Today we are witnessing very clearly that the very issue of nuclear weapons goes against the grain of security. So if we wish to eliminate this threat to security, all of those who possess these weapons must be committed to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. One of the requirements for which is that on a step-by-step basis, those who possess these weapons must move towards a path of disarmament and elimination of these weapons. And not many of them have never adhered to those requirements and merely voice concerns to other countries that they should disarm. So the security of the Korean Peninsula is very important for us. We have very good relationships with South Korea. We have very good relationships with China as well as Japan. So any tension in that region in the Far East is against our benefits, and we invite everyone continuously to patience and invite them to address and resolve problems through diplomacy and dialogue, because under these conditions, continuing these tensions can be extremely dangerous.
Mr. President, our President Trump was elected on a theme of America First. You're watching him now making his first speech to the United Nations. What is your view so far, early into this administration, of this presidency and its foreign policy doctrine?
Well, the presidency in the United States is an internal American matter. It is for the American people, of course, to decide on whom their president is going to be, and they should be the judge in order to criticize and recognize or not recognize the policies or the implementations of any president or presidency. What is important in the world today, it doesn't so much matter who the president of the United States is. That, again, is a purview of the United States. But what that administration chooses, how that administration chooses to behave with the world, how this administration chooses to be committed to previous engagements and commitments of America, and in action respect the commitments of the United States of America, that is of utmost importance for the world, because America is an international player, is an important country, because everyone wants to have trust in the future of the United States of America and clearly understand what do they seek, what does the administration seek. With many world leaders during this time that you mentioned, I have met with them, I have spoken with them, and all of them see the future of America as somewhat ambiguous. The decisions taken by Mr. Trump are not very clear. What will he do tomorrow? What will he do next month? And this can be against the benefit of the United States, because all of those who wish to establish or deepen strategic, commercial, economic relationships with the United States of America is dependent upon their level of trust on the continuity of the path chosen by the United States of America and the government in the administration at that time.
Would you sit down and have a conversation with President Trump? Do you think that would be helpful?
Thus far, since the Islamic Revolution, we've never had direct bilateral meetings between presidents of the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States of America. In the previous administration, perhaps the atmosphere, the proper atmosphere was being prepared for such a potential dialogue. However, the tone and the various positions taken by Mr. Trump thus far has defeated the possibility, unless we see in the future and we witness a change in the positions of the United States of America, when the United States government very transparently speaks of an aim of regime change in Iran, talking in a bilateral fashion becomes very meaningless. And when they speak with lack of clarity about their intentions, it really is preview of any meeting, and it's useless. So any dialogue and any meeting would be with the aim of coming out of such a meeting or gathering with more beneficial conditions for the two sides. And under the current atmosphere, in the current atmosphere, I do not see the current requirements for such a meeting.
I want to ask you about a UN working group this week has condemned Iranian imprisonment of Iranian Americans, a father and son, the Namazis. I understand, like our country, there's a separation of powers. So let me ask you this way. What resolution do you think you would like to see in these cases?
Well, you see, Iranians are imprisoned in the United States of America. And, of course, most importantly, we wish for their freedom to be realized ever quicker and for them to return home. And in Iran, perhaps there may be prisoners whose relatives and families would wish to have them back in their homes and in their embrace. However, The ones that you name, according to Iran and Iranian law, they are not Americans, they're Iranians. Because you do know certainly that under our laws, dual citizenships are not accepted. So if someone is an Iranian citizen, even though he or she may have a secondary citizenship, from our laws, from our purview, he or she is Iranian. So according to my own like and taste, of course I am very keen on helping Iranians, whether those who are conducting free enterprise, those who may have challenges and problems, or those who may be tangled up in the courts or may be imprisoned. However, in Iran, the judiciary is an independent branch, and it would be a tragedy if that branch were not independent. It benefits all sides to have an independent judiciary, because no one can allow themselves to issue a command to the presiding judge. It is the judge who will pass judgment according to the framework of that country's laws. Therefore, our executive branch is not able, nor should it be able, to interfere in the judiciary. But I can oversee, as the president, an adherence to the framework of the laws according to the Constitution. The accused must have access to legal counsel, be able to mount a proper defense. The conditions of the prison must be acceptable. The various steps in court, from the beginning all the way to appeal, must be observed according to the letter of the law, and I am very hopeful that I can, for my part, during this second term of my presidency, adhere to my responsibilities within this framework.
If I may ask you a final question regarding Syria, it's a country that Iran is a strong supporter of. President Trump has backed away from the idea of regime change. I'm just curious what your view of post-ISIS Syria will be, assuming that ISIS is defeated as a threat there. What do you think the future of Syria is?
Today, the situation in Syria has improved over the past. Many of the cities under the tentacles of Daesh, ISIS, have been freed. Daesh no longer enjoys the privileged position it had in Syria or in Iraq. So if anyone thinks that from this point forward, ISIS or Daesh is a great power that will be able to confront legitimate governments and armed forces, that mindset is weakening on a daily basis, even though we still have a long path to go until the ultimate and resolute defeat of terrorism. But today's conditions in Syria are much better compared to the past. Now our efforts are focused on the ceasefire that we have realized in Syria. It can be sustained, and it is an effort that Iran, Russia, and Turkey realized in result of the Astana meeting, and it must continue. We wish for peace to return to Syria, the terrorists to be completely defeated, and conditions in Syria for a peaceful and stable life and a return of those driven from their homes. Millions, you know, today are living in tents, in camps, and outside of their countries and even the region. So we must create the conditions, pave the way for all of them to come back. Many of them have lost their homes. We must render the appropriate aid and assistance for a return to a dignified life. So, and of course, next to that, in parallel with that, the conditions must be favorable, made favorable for proper elections, for a new constitution for Syria, and it will be in need of a leadership or leaders whom are chosen directly by the vote of the people. And on this path and with these objectives, we will continue to fully support the people of Syria. And at the end of the day, it will be the people of Syria whom will be responsible for the future of their nation, for the future constitution, and a future leadership and government structure of their country.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.